It's the Jetsons and Rosie come home. Judy Jetson nervously drove through rush hour traffic on one of the galaxy's busiest skyways. By her side was the family's robotic maid, Rosie, who was also doubling as Judy's driving instructor. "Don't worry, Judy," Rosie assured her. "You'll pass your driving test. Rosie, are you all right?" Judy asked. "Not to worry," Rosie answered. "It's just a case of the microchip hiccups." When they arrived home at the Jetsons' apartment, Rosie began her next job of the day, cleaning Elroy's bedroom. "Watch out for my scale model of the Titan trade towers," he called to her. But within seconds, Rosie had tripped over Astro, sprawling into Elroy's project and knocking it down. "Sorry, Roy boy," chirped Rosie. "I guess my peripheral location sensors are on the blink." Meanwhile, George was looking for his favorite slippers. He had just spent a grueling 3 hours at work and was ready to relax. "You shouldn't have left those things lying around, Mr. J," Rosie scolded him. "They really clogged up my computerized canister." George was annoyed. He loved those slippers. "But they've been under this chair for 20 years, he whined. "Sorry about that," said Rosie. "But to make it up to you, I made your favorite dish for dinner. Come and get it." The Jetsons sat down and dug in. "Yuck," said George, frowning. "That's not Solaris souffle." Rosie laughed. "Of course not. It's Venusian vegetable delight." "But Rosie," said Jane, "we all hate this stuff. You know that." "Humans," exclaimed Rosie, leaving the dining room in a huff. Jane and George were really worried that something was very wrong with Rosie. George zipped over to visit Henry Orbit, the robot expert. If anyone could help, Henry certainly could. "Sounds like her microchip master cylinder needs replacing," said Henry, when George had explained the problem. "Why don't you sneak a peek at Rosie's odometer late tonight when she's offline?" After Rosie had gone to sleep that night, George checked and found that she was 35,000 miles overdue for a master cylinder replacement. No wonder she's been acting so strangely, George thought. But at least now we know what to do. First thing in the morning, George and Jane headed off to Robot City to get Rosie a new part. "No problem," said the salesman. "What's the model number?" "She's a Mechanomaid XB500, answered Jane. "What are you, madam, an antique dealer?" the salesman laughed. "The manual alone has become a collector's item." He led them off to a row of shiny new robots. "Why not consider a state-of-the-art Mechanomaid 2000? He suggested. "She has hyperdrive hover feet to ensure totally silent operation, and she's user-friendly." "No, thank you," said George impatiently. "We just want a new master cylinder for our XB500. "I wouldn't dream of giving her up," Jane added. "She's practically a member of the family." While George and Jane were at Robot City, Rosie arrived at George's office with a bagged lunch. "Mr. J left without this, Mr. Spacely," she told his boss. "May I give it to him, please?" "Your Mr. J hasn't even come in yet, Rosie," Spacely growled. "If you see him, tell him he's late." "Oh, dear," Rosie said, beeping nervously. I hope nothing bad has happened to him. I'd better use my employer locator sensor. Rosie quickly tracked George and Jane to Robot City. When she looked through the window, she saw them with a salesman watching the Mechanomaid 2000 demonstration. I can't believe it, she cried. The Jetsons want to replace me. Rosie immediately raced home and began packing her things. After all I've done for them, she wailed. They didn't even give me a month's notice. If I put my circuits in overdrive, maybe I can be out of here before they fire me. Then she scribbled a goodbye note and left Astro sobbing at the door, wondering why she was leaving. A Mechanomaid with my experience should have no trouble finding another job, Rosie told herself as she headed for the nearest employment agency. Sorry, honey, said the gum-chewing receptionist. No one is hiring old models like you these days. Rosie took the news hard. I understand, she said slowly. Thanks anyway. Finally, after applying for job after job, the owner of a high-rise hired Rosie to wash windows. Remember, no glitches. I'll be watching your every move, the boss called, as Rosie was hoisted up the side of the building. But Rosie's peripheral sensors went on the blink, and she missed a dozen windows. You're fired, shouted the boss from down below. Meanwhile, Jane had gotten Rosie's note and called George in a panic. Together they searched all of her favorite places. The Beta Bingo Parlor, the Lubra Coffee Shop, but Rosie couldn't be found. Why would she think we were going to fire her? George wondered. Robots can be pretty unpredictable when their master cylinders act up, offered Henry Orbit, who had come over to help. Not knowing where else to turn, George and Jane drove to the police station to file a missing persons report. She was last seen wearing an apron, Jane told the desk sergeant. The officer's mouth dropped open. No clothes? He asked curiously. Robots don't wear clothes, George told him. The sergeant threw down his pencil. Robots! This department's for missing persons. Now, don't waste any more of my time, he snapped, pointing toward the exit. That night after dinner, the apartment was quiet. I miss Rosie, Elroy said sadly. Who's going to help me with my homework tapes? Judy sighed. And who'll give me driving lessons? She wondered. You could ask us, Jane offered. We're your parents. It's not the same, Mom, Judy explained. Rosie's special. Yeah, special, agreed Elroy. Rosie was sure the Jetsons had forgotten all about her. Lonely and tired and yearning for a nice hot cup of cosmic oil, she wandered from place to place looking for a job. She didn't know where she would live or how she would pay for things. The Jetsons had always taken care of her. They're probably thrilled with their new 2000 model, she sadly told herself. As the days passed, life without Rosie became increasingly unbearable for the Jetsons. In fact, George didn't think he could eat Jane's cooking one more night. Not knowing what else to do, he stopped by Robot City and picked up a Mechanomaid 2000. George, how could you? Let's just try her out, pleaded George. The salesman said if we don't like her, we can send her back. Soon the new super robot had completely taken over. To save on electricity, she turned off the power while George and Elroy were watching a baseball game. Then she said Astro was dirty and made him sleep outside. She even refused to make George's lunch. "You don't need it, Jetson," she decided. "You appear to be getting a little paunchy." "Mom, she's a digital dictator. Can we please put her offline?" Judy begged. But that was impossible because the Mechanomaid came equipped with gamma backup generators. Jane looked at George. "If this is the wave of the future, then I don't like it," she said. The entire Jetson family was miserable and wanted Rosie back more than ever. The next day, it was time for Judy to take her driving test. But without Rosie, she was sure she wouldn't pass. "Do it for her," Jane urged. "Rosie wouldn't want you to quit." "You're right, Mom," Judy agreed. "I won't let her down." That afternoon, Judy cruised down the skyway with the instructor at her side. "Excellent," he complimented her. "Who taught you how to drive?" "Rosie," Judy exclaimed. "There she is." "I beg your pardon?" asked the confused instructor. "On that bench over there," Judy cried. "I found her." Without warning, Judy made an illegal U-turn, causing her instructor and everyone else on the ground to panic. Judy slammed on the brakes, jumped out, and ran over to Rosie. "We've all missed you so much," Judy cried. "I missed you too, Rosie said. When Judy and Rosie arrived at home, the first thing they saw was the Mechanomaid 2000. "Jetson residents," the robot said as she greeted Rosie. "Who, or should I say, what, is calling?" Rosie burst into tears. "I wasn't missed at all," she declared. "I've been replaced, just as I suspected." "Rosie, wait! You don't understand," Judy called as Rosie zipped back out of the apartment. Jane heard the commotion and came running. "What's going on?" she asked. "I found Rosie, but when she saw this," Judy exclaimed, pointing to the new maid, "she left." "Why are you all so worried about that piece of transistorized trash?" chirped the Mechanomaid. "Oh, button your microchip," snapped Jane. "Judy, gather everyone together. We've got to find Rosie before she does something drastic." By now, Rosie was well on her way to the junkyard. "The Jetsons don't want me, and I'm no good to anybody," she said dejectedly. "I malfunction all the time. I have no place else to go. I'll be more useful as scrap metal." And then she sat herself down on a big heap of cars and appliances and waited to be compacted and carted away. "I'll bet I know where she went," cried Elroy. "The Jupiter Junkyard. Come on, let's go." When the Jetsons got there, they saw a huge compactor ready to flatten Rosie into a pile of scrap metal. "Rosie, come back from there and hurry," Judy yelled. "I can't. I'm stuck," cried Rosie. "Hang on," George told her, and with the rest of the family pulling behind him, he freed Rosie from the heap of metal in the nick of time. Back at home, everyone celebrated Rosie's return. "Thank goodness we got to the junkyard when we did," George said to Rosie. "All you needed was that new master cylinder. Now you're good as new." "Thanks, Mr. J," Rosie chirped. "I should have known you wouldn't choose this manic Mechanomaid over me. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some unfinished business to attend to." And with that, Rosie escorted the 2000 model to the door. Okay, folks, how about some dinner? A little Venusian vegetable delight, perhaps? Rosie asked. George was alarmed. Rosie, are you feeling all right? He said. Just kidding, Mr. J, Rosie replied. See, I've got my sense of humor back. Oh, Rosie, Jane laughed. You're out of this world.